very much. I got the applause before I'm done. That's good, first time. I would like to introduce the European guidelines, or proposed European guidelines for improving infrastructures for leisure time physical activity. And these guidelines has been developed as a project funded by the European Commission involving 12 European countries. But let me start focusing on why we need such a project, what makes a difference. And I just took one example. I visited all the sites, all the countries that participated in the Impala project, and one site was Norway, Oslo, and you all know these from certain deprived areas in your countries, these kind of neighborhoods, and you see these are the infrastructures for physical activity that had been designed in the past, and you see the little lost kid there playing in a different corner of this place. But of course this is Norway, this is Oslo, this is one of the richest countries in Europe, so that's not all the story. If you look further within this neighborhood, you find these quite nicely built infrastructures, more focusing on sport activities, leisure time physical activities, sport for youth and adolescents and kids, as you can see here. So this is an additional infrastructure that they provide there. Other infrastructures are also in this neighborhood to complete this picture. But where are all the kids? Where do they, the two girls, are going to? And you see there is a fantastic new water park and a playground that they also built in this neighborhood. So you see there's a variety of different infrastructures, even in a deprived neighborhood. It is very well and rich, well-developed country. That's not the case in all places in Europe, but that's what the difference is. So to talk about the Impala project, I should start with the design of the project and the objectives. And the main objectives were related to identifying and disseminating good practice of improving local infrastructures in the area of leisure time physical activity. And one important outcome of the Impala project were these proposed European guidelines for improving infrastructures. And if we say infrastructures within the Impala project, it's very important that we not just focus on sport facilities. So quite often the discussion within the sports sector in previous decades were focusing only on sport facilities. On the other hand, we are also not only focusing on the urban and other infrastructures, the urban space and leisure time infrastructures outside sport facilities. So many attempts within the public health area very often focus primarily on public transportation, not including sport facilities. So the Impala project used an integrative approach to look at infrastructures for physical activity, including both sport facilities and leisure time infrastructures like in parks and other places like this, and also the whole urban and also green spaces that are usable for leisure time physical activity. So here you get an overview on the partners involved in the project. And as the Impala project was mainly designed to be of added value for policy development and practice in participating countries and at the European Union level, you can see on the one hand it's research partners involved, but also partners from governments or from NGOs within the different countries has been involved in the project. So it's really a project on applied science and on knowledge translation. That was a strong focus of the Impala project. So we went through different steps and procedures when we conducted the project. We started with an assessment of existing policies to promote good infrastructures for physical activity in participating countries. We looked also at different mechanisms, for example, planning mechanisms, how to develop infrastructures. We discussed quality criteria, and we looked at international guidelines in the area of physical activity infrastructures. And we also discussed our results from the reviews with policymakers and other stakeholders in participating countries. So what makes sense for them as practitioners or policymakers in their perception. And as I said, the final step was then related to the proposed guidelines for improving infrastructures. And I just, because of the short time of the presentation, I just want to focus on the guidelines. First of all, I would like to mention what is actually the specific focus of these guidelines. And you can see here, these are three important principles that are also focusing our work on the guidelines. It's social equity, it's intersectoral collaboration, and it's participation. So it's not just on having nice infrastructures, it's also on the distribution of these infrastructures, according to the issue that you just mentioned, in terms of increasing equity and inequality with regard to physical activity. And it's on intersectoral collaboration. It's not on sport development only, it's not on public health development only, it's an integrated approach. It's not on urban development only, it's an integrated approach. And it's very much on participation, so involving of different stakeholders in planning procedures, in developing infrastructure. These are three leading principles, and as you can see, different important EU policy papers emphasize these principles in different ways, and also from the World Health Organization, different papers. So if you go through the proposed guidelines, through the Impala guidelines, you see how we dealt with this issue to be as simple as possible, but also to give important information to the reader. So we always tried for these 5 areas: policy, planning, building, financing, and management. We also wrote at the end 2 pages, one checklist for assessment. This one here is an example for policy assessment. So it's related on the variety, but also on the quality of policies in this area. And you will find the same in the guidelines on planning mechanisms, on building, and so on. And a checklist for improving. So how to proceed if you assess your policies in your country on infrastructure development, how then to proceed in terms of improvement, because that's the ultimate goal of the guidelines. And with these 2 pages, we also present examples of good practice on infrastructure improvement, and I will give you only a few examples at the end of my presentation. That also shows very nicely how the variety in Europe and how different countries contribute to improving infrastructures already. So with regard to policies, we found that the Norwegian action plan, National Action Plan on Physical Activity, is a very good example because it's an intersectoral approach. As far as I know, about 7 ministries, different sectors are involved. And it's also characterized by clearly defined leadership, and it's in comparison to other national action plans, it also is very specific in implementation, and that's of course is a crucial quality criteria if you are looking for real implementation and not just political will that is explained in some documents. So clear measures, defined responsibilities, time frames, and so on. Another very nice but quite different example is we found in Spain, in Extremadura, actually a very deprived region in Spain, but here you find this very, very nice facility as a tool for regional development, also funded by structural funds of the European Commission, and it's a center for sport in the nature. It's including sport businesses. It's tried to create economic incentives in this deprived area, and it's also a facility that has been also got a European prize for the building itself. So it's really worth to go there. Different example now related to planning procedures. It's very interesting in how far the different countries, for example, involve the population in their planning of infrastructure. So in some countries it's more or less the rule to have a very strong involvement of citizens in planning. In other countries it's not. So in Germany we have developed this kind of integrated planning of sport facilities and infrastructures and also sport programs as an approach that is applied now by different municipalities. You see the city of Frankfurt as one example, and within this planning approach, on the one hand, empirical data are used, also on the physical activity behavior of the population, local population representative data. But on the other hand, it's a cooperative planning approach where different stakeholders from different areas, from sport clubs, but also from different groups of the population are involved in the planning procedure. And also policymakers are involved. That is also crucial because to come to implementation at the end in new infrastructures or modification in existing infrastructures, also it's important that policymakers learn in such a process what is really needed from a population perspective. With regard to building, there of course there are millions of examples, good examples in Europe. We have chosen this one from Portugal because it's from the location of these facilities. It's a very good example. They built very nice facilities, not in a rich neighborhood, but in a very deprived neighborhood, and use it as an incentive also for social integration within this neighborhood. And this also has been funded by the European Union. And then we have examples also of private investment, private engagement in this area of financing and also tackling issues of social inequality with regard to physical activity, like the Cruyff Foundation here in the Netherlands, that also is especially focusing on the deprived neighborhood and getting children and adolescents involved in sport engagement. And finally, with regard to management, this is also one example that we have chosen from Central Eastern Europe here, from the Czech Republic, where you often find a strategy in countries like, for example, Lithuania, because of very restricted budget, public budget, just to focus on private investment. And this might be a problem if you think about inequality. It might even increase inequality with regard to sport and physical activity if you just go through the private sector. Here you find an example in the Czech Republic where they nicely combined the private investment and development and the idea also to serve the common good. So we finalized the Impala project at the end of last year, and we already have different translations, so the master version is in English, but we have official translation already in Czech, French, German, and Portuguese, and there are other translations now in preparation. Probably some of them are already ready. So this is probably a guideline that are widely used now already in some of the EU countries, and probably will even be used beyond Europe in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.